I don't really know what it is, but there's just something satisfyingly appealing about looking at world maps. Perhaps it's the visual interpretations that can be captured from a single image. Perhaps it's the pretty colour schemes, or perhaps it is just that they are straight up fascinating, intriguing and thought-provoking. So in this video we've got some completely random yet intriguing maps of our planet. Starting off with quite a useful one, a map or guide to the different types of Americas. When one thinks of the word America, you will likely think of the US of A. The White House, the Star-Spangled Banner, or perhaps the Statue of Liberty. All objects which our brains immediately assume and associate with this word. However, there are actually many different variations of the Americas. This map alone depicts 11 different ways of categorizing this region. We will not go through all of them of course, but the most obvious ones stretch across the top line, with the Americas being the entire region from Patagonia in South America to the northern parts of Canada that stretch into the Arctic. French America is quite intriguing, as this is the French-speaking region of Canada, French Guiana, and multiple French-speaking Caribbean islands. Android versus iOS in Europe. As someone who is from the UK and sees iPhones absolutely dominate market share, it is very surprising to me to see that most of the rest of Europe has an Android majority. For some reason it appears that Northern Europe, that's the UK, Denmark, Iceland, Norway and Sweden, seem to use iOS more, whereas pretty much the rest of the continent uses Android. Android phones are of course a lot cheaper than iPhones, so it makes complete sense for Android to dominate in the countries with a lower GDP per capita. Russia likely doubles up on this with the fact that they don't like the US, so most likely don't want to buy an American through and through product. China Railways 2008 versus 2020. Now I've seen this map pop up quite a few times on social media, and every time I see it, it doesn't fail to blow my mind. China's railway map in 2008 was, quite frankly, well, pathetic. Skip forward 12 years and it has completely and utterly transformed, to a point that is just so incomprehensible. How is it even possible for a country to implement such a vast amount of railway? Oh, yeah, of course, it's China, the country which doesn't seem to have a limit on infrastructure projects. It also helps that the country has a population of over 1.4 billion, so there certainly isn't a shortage of workers. Which country in the world has the most beautiful people according to Europeans? Italians, you will be very happy with this map. Brits, we can look away and cry in a corner. So when asked which country has the most attractive people, this is how Europe responded. Eastern Europe is completely dominated by the choice of Italy. Towards the west points more towards Spain. The Portuguese of course chose Brazil, and Turkey chose Russia. The state of democracy. This map shows the world by its democracy index rates. The deeper blue you are, the higher you score. The more red you are, the lower you score, and the more authoritarian your country is. So the Western world, which encapsulates the USA, Canada, most of Europe, Australia and New Zealand, is a pretty healthy shade of blue, with the Nordic countries, of course, scoring the highest. The rest of the world then pretty much sees itself on the lower end of the spectrum, with countries like Uruguay, Japan and South Korea being slight anomalies. Countries of the world by total flights per year. Perhaps one of the most bizarre looking maps in today's video. In this map we can see poor old Africa has almost disappeared. Central Africa specifically is almost non-existent. South Africa completely dominates this continent. South America has shrunk significantly as well as Southeast Asia. Europe and the USA are extremely inflated in this map, which comes to no surprise as most of the world's busiest airports are located in these regions. Now let's compare this map with a map of the world by wealth, and oh wow, that is extremely interesting. Excluding a few countries, mainly in Asia, this map is, well, almost identical to the previous map, which of course has a direct correlation. Countries that are wealthy and have rich citizens and good infrastructure fly more for business and leisure than those in poorer developing nations. India is perhaps the biggest anomaly in these maps, as its wealth representation is much larger than its total flight representation. This could be due to the fact that India has a large economy with many wealthy people, but it also has hundreds of millions of people living in poverty who can't afford air travel. Kangaroos versus people. Alright, now this one is nuts. This is the amount of kangaroos versus people in Australia. I knew there were a lot of kangaroos in Australia, but not this much. Kangaroos outnumber humans in pretty much every region of the country, excluding South Australia and Tasmania. The most surprising state is Queensland, where kangaroos outnumber humans over 4 to 1 at 22 million and 5 million respectively. Where the world wants to move to. Now this map is absolutely fascinating and I spent so much time vigorously depicting it. There are so many interesting results here. It seems that Canada and Japan dominate this map, with most of Southeast Asia, Australia and North America wanting to move in with the Japanese. Mexico, many countries in Africa, India, Pakistan, the UK and France all would like to move to Canada the most likely due to it being a very wealthy, English-speaking country with a very high quality of life. Now, what is the most baffling result here? For me, it's got to be Russia, who would most like to move to the USA, who is without doubt its biggest enemy on the planet. Also, Japan wanting to move to the UK is also quite a rogue result. Europe's pedestrian signs. Now there isn't much to see in this map, to be honest. All of the pedestrians are very similar. They either face left or right. However, there is one country in particular who is different to the rest. Can you spot it? It is Poland, whose pedestrian symbol appears to be someone facing straight or standing still, the only anomaly on this map. 5% of the population. Now this one is just straight up ridiculous. 5% of the world's population lives in the area shaded blue, and another 5% lives in the area shaded red. However, when you actually think about it, it actually isn't too crazy, as the blue areas are generally inhospitable places like deserts, mountainous regions, rainforest or glacial zones. The red areas are generally megacities with economic pull. Side of the road. This next map shows the world by which side of the road they drive on. Now, what's annoying for me is that of course I'm from the UK, who decides to drive on the left-hand side, which is the opposite to the rest of the continent. So whenever I have to drive in a European country, I have to adapt to driving on the other side of the road, and sometimes in an automatic car too, as most people tend to drive manual or stick, as they call it in the US, in the UK. Many Commonwealth nations also drive on the left-hand side too, such as Australia, New Zealand, India and South Africa. It is interesting that Suriname, a former Dutch colony, drives on the left, but the Dutch drive on the right. So there we have it, some very random, bizarre, but interesting world maps. If you like this video and this sort of content, drop a like and let us know below if you'd like to see part 2. Thank you so much for watching, remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, we will see you very soon in our next video.